Today is a little bit different. I thought I would shake things up a little bit since I haven't read a lot of those actually quite essential books for game development in quite a while. And I wanted to brush up on some of the ideas in them, so I thought, hey, maybe this might be interesting for you guys as well. Some of these books are, from my point of view, really important for video games. So especially if you are a game developer, but also if you are a consumer, a gamer. It might be helpful to just know about some of those concepts those books talk about. And to start things off, I wanted to talk about Johann Huizinga's Homo Ludens, which basically deals with the question, what actually is playing? Not so much why people play, this might be a topic for another video, but what actually is play, the act of playing. And Huizinga, as a sociologist, of course tries to look at it from the lens of society and culture. How do those concepts interact with play, and what does play have to do with culture? Spoiler alert, quite a lot actually. Before all of that, just a quick reminder to like the video and leave a comment, so hopefully more people who like video games and video game development will be able to find this video more easily. And if you have any thoughts or questions, just leave them in the comment section below. That being said, let's get on with the video. Johann Huizinga was a cultural historian and comparative linguist from the Netherlands. Born and raised in a very academic household, his father was already a professor, which he ended up being as well. And while he wrote a variety of papers and books, Homo Ludens is probably the most well-known one, especially outside of the Netherlands. That's the book right here, the German version of it at least. The title more or less translates to the playing human. Although if you want to be pedantic, you cannot literally translate Ludens to playing, but I guess that is the linguist speaking. The playing human, however, describes the theme of the book actually quite well, since Huizinga tries to argue that play is a basic element of human culture that cannot be reduced to any other factor. We don't play as the result of something, but things result from play. Play is at the center, at the basis of everything that we create. And it's not just us humans who play, animals do so as well. It's just that we have kind of turned it up a notch. In the first chapter of the book, and this is probably the one that most people read, he tries to define what play actually is. And he identifies 5 characteristics that are mostly still accepted by people dealing with games and play to this day. Those characteristics are that 1, play is free. It is in fact freedom. 2nd, play is not ordinary life. It is actually very distinct from what we like to call real life nowadays. It is actually 3, distinct to ordinary life in both the location and the duration of the play. Play or a game always takes a specific time and is always usually set in a very specific location. To ensure this, it is important to have 4, order. Play creates order. Play is order. It actually demands order absolute in 3. Every game that you play has certain rules. That's how you play a game. And 5 is that play is not connected to any material interest. There is no profit that you can gain from play. You don't have any extrinsic motivation for playing the game. You just play it for play's sake. In this chapter, Huizinga also mentions the importance of immersion in play, and that technically differentiating between being something or playing something is quite a modern concept. If you talk to, like, for example, a native tribesman in a remote place, or just look at their language, once again, linguist, you might see that quite often people don't talk about, for example, an actor playing an animal, rather an actor taking the essence of an animal or becoming an animal. The term magic circle technically also originates from this text, although Huizinga himself only mentions it in passing. It was popularized by Eric Zimmerman and Katie Salen, who by the way also wrote an amazing book on video game design, or for non-academics probably by Gamasutra writer Stephen Conway. The magic circle, just to quickly summarize it, describes this limitation of space that you have in playing. The idea is that when you play a game, you enter the magic circle, and as long as you are inside of the magic circle, you are inside of the world of the game. When you're outside of the magic circle, you are in real life. There is actually quite a bit of a debate on how strict of a distinction there should be made between a game and what people nowadays describe as real life. Many sociologists don't really like the idea of a very clear distinction between them, and neither did Huizinga, at least according to the final passage of Homo Ludens. Personally, I think it depends a little bit on the scope you're looking at. Huizinga quite clearly looks at games from a cultural, a sociological point of view. Whereas, for example, Ceylon and Zimmerman primarily talk about game design, the design of a specific product, where it sometimes does make more sense to have a clearer distinction. I like to think of it like when you take a look at a gradient in, let's say, Photoshop. You can't really see a border. One color seamlessly drifts into the other. However, if you just single out one spot on the left and one spot on the right, you can still compare the two of them, and you will find them probably to be quite different in some aspects. The next chapters of the book are a bit more nerdy. First, Huizinga goes on a long linguistic escapade on how play is described in different languages, from Latin and Greek and Sanskrit to Japanese and even Blackfoot. The rest of the book then looks at a variety of cultural institutions and how they can be traced back to the idea of play. Law, war, knowledge, poetry or art are to Huizinga all just complex forms of play that have been made into something different that is not really play anymore. You could almost say they have been tainted. There is one other concept in this book that is quite interesting, and that is the idea of holy seriousness. Heiliger Ernst in German. I'm not sure if I translated this correctly, but it is more or less accurate. Which is the idea that someone artificially loads up an activity, a game, with meaning, which is a contradiction, since Huizinga points out that games or play are supposed to be detached from the real world. There should not be any meaning to it. This is one of the most essential things that makes play. I made a whole video where I rant a bit more about this recursive idea, but the most interesting thing is that this is how Huizinga argues that real-world culture comes from play. Basically what he describes in the different chapters on the different institutions. They take some ideas and principles from play and apply it to a real-life situation. Which is why, for example, a court of law follows a similar structure as a stage play. A court session is clearly specified in time and space. It happens at a clearly defined space, a courthouse, and at a clearly defined time. There is usually a certain agenda that the judge has to follow, and you have various actors who are there to fulfill specific roles, like a judge or a defender and so on. And the whole act follows very strict procedural rules. The main difference, of course, is that the outcome of a court trial has very much an effect on your ordinary life compared to a game. There is obviously a lot more to Huizinga's work in general, but I think those are the most important points from that book that, in my opinion, correlate to actual game development. I know it might be a little bit abstract, we're not talking about game engines or how to work on specific game mechanics per se, but I found that it is actually quite important to understand why people might actually engage with the game that you're making. And some of the ideas that you can find in Homo Ludens and books like this do actually help a lot to better understand why people want to engage with the game, or even where some of the tensions that you might experience in gaming culture nowadays actually come from. I do hope that some of you guys maybe agree with me on this and found this short summary helpful, or maybe just got one or two ideas, inspirations out of it. I will definitely go through more of the books that I read, which at least to me are super interesting in that regard, and that might be talked more about in maybe an academic context, but usually not as popular with developers or on the internet. And I do think they deserve a little bit more love. If that sounds interesting to you, subscribe to my channel to stay up to date. Other than that, I hope you have a great day and see you in the next video.